We're going to start tonight, though, with some brand new drone video that we have in for you showing migrant families crossing the Rio Grande in Eagle Pass. Big picture. It's startling to see, but it's not anything new, unfortunately. Some of the migrant children are coming, obviously, with their moms and dads, which also is nothing necessarily new.
Yeah.
But when you see them, your heart goes out.
It's different when you talk about the numbers. It's far, more, I guess, sobering to see the video and the faces of the people who are making these journeys. And even after crossing, many of them are way over that razor wire, which we know can be dangerous, it can be hurtful. And we've been telling you that this is not the only area where we're seeing this rush of crossings happen. El Paso is also seeing a large number of migrants. City shelters say many of those folks are coming from Venezuela. So we made this little map for you so you could get a better idea of just how long the trip is. We're talking a 3,000-mile journey. And it's really dangerous when you get to a really particular area between Colombia and Panama. It's called the Darien Gap, and it's filled with all sorts of threats. We're talking spiders, snakes, armed guerrilla men. It's very scary. Yeah,
there's a father and a son who made the trip to El Paso, and actually they shared a lot of pictures of their journey with us. They traveled through that area that Nicole just talked about called the Darien Gap, which is a mountainous forest and a lot of dangerous animals in that area. And then masked robbers, also known to wait for migrants passing through. Father and son also rode, as you just saw, on top of a train on their journey to the United States, and they finally did cross into El Paso. Our Ken Molestina has spent the day at the border fence in El Paso, so we know so much is going on there in that city when it comes to the migrant crisis. Kind of walk us through the day, everything you've seen with your own eyes.
So much, Doug. We got here early this morning, flew into town, and immediately we got a sense of what's happening here. So let's go through all of this here for you, because again, there are a lot of things happening simultaneously here, so just bear with me, but we do need to talk about it all here. So right now we are, as you mentioned a second ago, we are literally standing just feet away from the border wall, the border fence, less than 50 yards behind me. I can already see a small group of migrants that are beginning to gather. They have already crossed illegally. They're waiting to be apprehended and to be arrested. Then they will be taken by CBP to a processing center. So that's what's happening right now, this moment where I'm standing. But let's get into some numbers here because we need to talk about it briefly to sort of paint the bigger picture of what's happening here. CBP, earlier today, they told me that for the first time in the last week or so, they finally today have started to see a dwindling in the numbers of the apprehensions, of the encounters that they're having with the migrants here at the border. Now, that's important to point out because they have been seeing record-breaking numbers every single day, and today that number, they said, finally is starting to go down. Another reason why it's important to point that out, because CBP, although they're seeing smaller numbers here at the border, the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, the shelters that are taking the folks in, they're still being overwhelmed. That's because there's sort of a backlog that's being caused. So even though the number may be smaller here at the border, the folks that are being released into the community, folks who have already been processed, who've started their asylum claims in many cases, and who've been given a first appearance court date, they need to go somewhere. So they're being released into the community. And a lot of the NGOs, the shelters, they're taking them in. So today, the city of El Paso said upwards of 1,300, closer to 1,400 migrants were released. They're expecting a similar number tomorrow and the days that come after that. And that's because at the central processing and the detention center, they have something close to 8,000 currently waiting to be released here into El Paso. So I needed to point that out. The other thing that's happening today is today is day 2 of the stepped up efforts on behalf of the state. The state of Texas has now started to charter buses to get some of these migrants off of the streets here in El Paso. The shelters obviously can't handle them all, so a lot of these folks are ending up on the streets, especially during the overnight hours. So today we saw several buses picking them up. They all congregate at one central bus depot in downtown El Paso. And from what we're being told right now, it's 3 main cities that they're being bused to free of charge. The state of Texas is picking up that bill, and those cities are New York, Denver, and Chicago. So still a lot going on over here. Again, CBP saying that the apprehensions here today, they're starting to dwindle, but the NGOs are still reporting a lot of folks showing up there looking for help and looking for resources. So it's kind of a backlog, kind of a bottleneck, however you want to describe it, but still a pretty intense situation out here in El Paso.
Ken, I mean, this is such a multi-layered issue. This is not there's not one way to solve it. There's not one way to look at it. So there's also been a lot of confusion as to how migrants are crossing in because there is a way to delineate someone who is coming into the country seeking asylum, and then someone who's coming into the country illegally.
Right.
So talk to me about the migrants who have been released into El Paso that have come in illegally.
So, unlike what you've seen in other border towns like Eagle Pass, like Del Rio, where we've all seen the images now of migrants sort of coming through the border, jumping over the barbed wire fencing, and they come in mass in groups. There is some of that happens here. In fact, like I told you, there's a small group behind me that's starting to gather now. We understand that they may have crossed over here illegally in a similar fashion. However, by and large, a lot of the migrants that are ending up at the NGOs on the streets here in El Paso, these are folks that actually came over the way that CBP asks them to cross over, which is to wait for their turn at an official port of entry, in this case the bridges. There are several here in El Paso. These are folks who have been waiting for their opportunity to come over and begin their asylum claim. Now, it's not guaranteed. That's the other thing. A lot of folks believe that this is guaranteed, that the moment they get here, if they say they're coming from, in this case, Venezuela, because that seems to be the overwhelming amount of people that are coming from that country seeking asylum here, they believe that it's automatic because they're fleeing a communist regime. That's not always the case. It is a long and lengthy process. But here in El Paso, a lot of the folks, again, that are processed and then released into the community, these are folks that have actually come over the way that the government is asking them to do it. Again, there's another group that we understand that in the last couple of days has started to gather on the south side over in Juarez, several thousand, depending on who you ask. But the Mexican government, we understand, is also stepping in to try and dissuade them from making the trek across. But yes, like you mentioned, there are two different, I guess, delineations, if you will, of the migrants that are crossing over. People who are crossing illegally in between the ports of entry. These are folks who do not want to wait on the bridge to cross over the way that CBP is asking them to do. These are people who just run out of patience and they just do it, and then others that are coming over the bridge. But again, that's what we're seeing out here. You add that, and then those that don't want to be detected at all. These are the folks that are criminal in nature, and you sort of get the picture of what the folks here are having to deal with here on the ground in El Paso. Again, it's a long, lengthy explanation. We can talk for days. I know we don't have all day, but I hope you got all of that.
Well, honestly, we got a good 9 minutes of discussion in on a subject that on a typical newscast is going to give you two and a half minutes, right?
That's right. That's what we're here for a full hour. So Ken, we really appreciate you being our eyes and ears down there. We know this is a big issue, and we appreciate it. Thank you.